Awesome.
Ooh, it is live time, folks. This is
Live.
Thursday
It
night
worked.
after dark noir.
I'm always amazed
episode.
every time. It's like magic.
Yeah.
It's all the way live.
Of course, my YouTube is still saying it's waiting for us to start, but we have actually
Is it?
officially started. So catch up, folks. Catch up. We have
That's right.
Tom,
Get real, people.
WA2IVD, on stream with us tonight. Tom is the guy that created the crowbar kits that Jim and myself. I don't know. Did Chuck and Ape? Did you guys ever get your videos out?
Not yet. No, I'm gonna wait.
Lazy.
Yeah, nobody can buy them.
Minimum
Yeah,
amount
but-
of flair from those two. What can I
But
say?
unlike
Yeah, I
Jim's,
know.
mine will be built right. So
Yeah, Jim, you had your
there's
you had your
there's no
wires
tour
crossed.
rights. I forgot.
Right.
Yeah,
You
you
had
had
your
your
wires
wires
crossed,
crossed,
didn't you?
Jim.
Yeah.
Not on
So
Tom's kit. What are you talking
Tonight's
about, Willis?
show promises to be an argument. I mean, this is a ham radio show, so you already knew that.
It's already
But we're gonna-
starting.
gonna-
So it begins.
We're going to talk about fusing and crowbars and electricity and where things go and why things go where they go, and should you fuse the negative? Because I fuse my negatives because someone told me, two people, they blew up their radios by not fusing the negative, and then some people argue that power flows from negative to positive. So all that and more tonight. How you doing, Tom?
I am doing well, Steve.
Good.
So before we get into the topic, I have to ask: did you enjoy Quartz Fest?
I did. It was a blast. I just being out in the desert was awesome. You know, like I need to make a
Well,
U-turn.
got-
Let me just pull off the road into the sand and do whatever and get back on the road. No problems.
He got to hang out with me and Liberty Cave. So
Yeah, the highlight right
good
There
there.
you go.
I mean, Rick
No,
more
it's-
than Chuck, but
It is a
Right.
lot of fun. It's one of those things. It's like Dayton. Even if you live a long ways away, everybody should do it at least once. Although you do have to be into camping a little to do Quartz Fest.
you know,
And
people in
dust.
the-
Like that's the thing that scares me about it is all the dust.
it wasn't
that's
windy
fine.
this year.
No, it was fine.
This is the first year I think that we didn't have any real high winds.
Now, how cold was it at night out there? 40s?
Yeah,
50s.
Yeah, that's
overnight. It was
That's not
50
bad.
after dark, and it was 40 overnight.
Not bad at all.
But we're going to talk about that next show.
Yeah. Right now we got David Wilson with the $7.99 Aussie dollar reduce. Keep upturned.
nice.
Good work, fellas. I don't know how to translate that to English, but that's my fault because I don't speak Australian. I'm sure that means something normal and encouraging and friendly and thoughtful. And,
I don't
we
think he
thank you
called
very
us
much, David.
numpties, so we're good
Right.
on that. Yeah, David,
Or
thank you.
champ. He didn't call you champ.
Or champ. He didn't champ
he
us.
didn't
That's
champ
right.
us, right?
Right. David,
And
thank
for
you.
champ- He says it means keep up the good work.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks,
So
David.
I'll blame that on typos on the keyboard.
could be
'cause
just a
everybody
typo, yeah.
autocorrects, yeah.
So you want to talk about fuses?
And we do. We're just dying to talk about fuses.
And I'm sure that you will get no comments whatsoever on this episode, right?
Exactly.
So let me put up a screen here. And
I'll get him. Hang on. Do that.
Oh,
There we go.
Oh, that's cool. Very professional, Steve.
look at that. So to the fuse or no fuse, that is the question. And let's see if I can make this work. All right. So let's take the first simple example. You just have a power supply and your radio sitting on your desk, and you got 12 volts going to the radio and nothing else is involved. And if this is your setup, if you just have a fuse in the positive line, you're probably fine. You're not going to have, because the entire circuit is going into the radio and back. You know, you need a full circuit, so it goes down one wire and back the other. So as long as this fuse opens, you're going to break the circuit and nothing else. You're going to stop the current flow. So for this situation, you should be fine. But now, let's say you're doing a mobile setup and you've got your Fratastat 5000 radio that you're going to put in your car. This is the vehicle frame here on the bottom. And yes, we're going to look at schematics. It's probably not as bad as looking at all those math charts from your show the other day, but
Nothing's as bad as that.
so let's say you've installed this and you're going to do a really good job. So you've got heavy cables going back to the battery, to the positive and one to the negative, and I'm showing the fuse in both sides here.
How
So
dare.
you run wires back to the battery just like you're supposed to for a good mobile setup. And then on the other side, your antenna is connected into the rig, and you've got the antenna is grounded because of the coax connector on the rig. But you've also taken your ground connector on the rig and you've grounded that to the frame of the vehicle. And of course, your antenna is grounded to the frame of the vehicle on the shield side, just from the antenna mount, usually, if it's a permanent mount. So everything on this side is nicely, strongly grounded to the frame. And that's the way you've done your mobile setup. I would call this a good wiring job for a mobile setup.
Let me know when we get to the question and answer portion.
You mean the
Okay,
argument portion, Abe?
So let me get to a couple more pieces here. So now let's look at the rest of the vehicle, though. So on pretty much every car, there is a really heavy ground strap that goes from the negative terminal of the battery to the frame of the vehicle. It's a heavy cable or strap on just about every production vehicle today. And the reason that they do that is because everything else that's wired in the vehicle, the starter motor, the fans and pumps and lights and computers and radios and everything, auto manufacturers use the frame as the negative lead, as their ground for that equipment. And then the positive goes to the positive terminal of the battery. Now, I'm not showing all the switches and fuses and fuse blocks, just to keep it simple. There would be fuses and stuff here in between in the positive leads. Does that make sense so far?
So far,
Yes.
yeah.
So all of this is, good normal setup. The trouble is, what happens if this big, heavy ground strap breaks? And some people I know are thinking, well, it's like, 2-gauge wire, or it's a big wide strap. That's never going to break.
Right.
Well-
They haven't been to Wisconsin.
Anybody who lives in the northern parts of the U.S.
Yep.
who deals with salt has seen these things corrode and fall apart over time, especially if your car is more than a few years old. So that big, heavy ground strap can break. So if that breaks, now let's look at what happens. If this is broken, all of these devices in your car don't have this return path to the battery anymore. And what's going to happen is
Where is it going?
it's going to go through your radio chassis and through your negative power lead of your radio. And that's how it's going to find its way back. And
That's
if you
why I
don't,
never ground that radio. It's bad news.
well, there's that. I guess that's one option. Yeah, but you're still going to have your antenna grounded, so you're going to have a ground through your UHF connector anyway. So if you don't have this fuse here, something inside your radio is going to become the fuse, especially when the starter motor kicks in and you're drawing 600 amps for a few seconds.
600 amps through it. Yeah.
So I have a question for you. I've always been taught that the fuse should be as close to the battery as possible, though.
Yes, that is true.
If you look at your wires that come on your radios, it's near the battery connection, not at the other end, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point, Chuck, and this is a bad representation. These really should be physically right here by the battery.
I apologize. This is a drawn to scale, Chuck.
No, I'm just,
You
I'm
know
just
what a
saying
stick
if
with,
you
Chuck.
do
No,
if you do
it's
hook
a good
if you
point.
do hook stuff up, it's supposed to be near the battery. I just
can't
want to
take
bring
you
that up for
anywhere.
people that didn't know that. I'm just giving good information out. That's all.
Embarrassing
Yes.
the
You're
guest.
giving
Like we're 5
information
minutes
out.
in. I mean, geez. Wow.
No,
I know he's a guest, Chuck.
The fuse
he's-
should be as close as possible to the source of the power. Always.
Well, so this is the by the book installation, right? So like every time I look at the instruction manuals from reputable radio companies like ICOM and Yaesu, this is how they depict
I'm
doing
triggered.
that.
I take offense at that. You
What,
said
because I didn't-
reputable.
Right. And that's what they say. But I've heard tale of all kinds of different things, right? So, like one of them is that my alternator, I believe, is grounded at the battery. It doesn't go through like the ground strap to get to the. It's not grounded to the chassis. It's grounded to the battery. So, like if I look at my negative post on my terminal, my battery, I've got like 3 or 4 heavy cables that come off of it. I believe one's the alternator. I could be mistaken.
Well, that's because you drive a fancy Jeep. Not all
So-
cars are built that well.
So it could be that I have more than one low impedance path to, well, I guess impedance doesn't matter because it's DC current, not AC current, right? But I do have more than one path to the battery negative.
You may, and some cars have a heavy ground wire that goes to the vehicle frame, and then they have another one that actually goes to the engine block.
Mhm.
So yes, there's usually more than one ground wire, and on newer cars they are starting to run more grounds actually out to some of the equipment, especially because of the computer equipment
Right.
to help with interference. So there are more grounds than just this one. But again, depending on the model of the car, depending on the age of the car, there may be more than one of these. But there's still a bunch of equipment that is depending on that one.
Right.
Some of those other grounds may or may not be attached to the frame somewhere else down the, further down the line. So
Yeah, and so like I've heard that if that fuse on the negative lead breaks, so if your fuse burns out, and your radio is now going to look for alternative paths to ground, that could potentially give you a little bit of a bite if you touch the wrong thing. And I guess you would have to be in circuit somehow if you were sitting in the car with your shoes on and stuff. And I don't know exactly how it would do that. But I've heard of that as a potential issue or problem, so much so that I know that some folks actually advocate not using a fuse and not running the negative all the way back to the battery, but taking the negative to a chassis ground somewhere and bypassing the battery altogether.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't think of a good. So yes, if this fuse here blows for some other reason, and this is still intact, or some other ground from the frame to the battery is still intact, you're correct. Your radio is going to try to, assuming that this lead is connected internally to the chassis of the radio, and they usually are, then yes, it's going to try to find the path, just like all these other components are going to try to find an alternate path. But if there really is something wrong with your radio, where something in the radio shorted and you're blowing fuses, then you're going to blow this positive one. So you're still going to blow it. And I mean, in terms of getting an electrical shock, I mean, 12 volts is not usually, electrical shock is not that it can happen, it can, but an electrical shock at 12 volts is not usually a problem, not usually something that's going to happen unless you're like soaking wet in salt water or something like that.
Right.
But if I don't know how you would get in that path. And I mean, you'd have to like basically break the wire here and be holding on to both
And grab it
sides
with
of or
both
something.
sides. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to be completing a circuit somehow. The other thing that I've heard, so anyhow, my mobile is set up the exact same way you have in the picture. So that's the way I went. So I'm not debating. I'm just throwing out there. The other thing that I've heard is that connecting your negative to the battery, you pick up the battery is a collection point for RF interference from all of the other devices that are in your car. And then by connecting your negative to the battery, you potentially are picking up more interference than you would if you connected to chassis. But given how it's all connected, I'm not 100% sure I believe that story either.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, all of those currents are flowing back to the battery, but this is the same reason that in your shack you have a common single point ground. That negative terminal on the battery is that common single point ground that everything else goes back to. So if you're referenced there, the battery is also a tremendous filter for electrical noise because the battery is very, very low impedance.
Gotcha.
So I don't think you're going to get more noise by going back to the battery. And another thing that is a good practice is you can put a couple of inductors, like noise filters, in both of the leads right at the battery. And I'd actually put another one right at the radio, and that really helps with like alternator whine and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
I like a Cabernet instead of alternator, but that's me. Boys, we got some keeping up to do here. I hate so we have a super chat that is from Tall Florida Todd for $20.
Thanks, Todd.
Because he wants to get one of them fancy Fretostats. So Todd, appreciate that, and I assume we'll see you next week there, buddy. And we got about 4 questions queued up. If you want to do some questions and answers, or keep going.
Do them.
No, I'm good.
So Don, my nemesis, Don is asking, how do you avoid ground loops?
The last thing that we just said, the common single point ground. If all of your ground references go to one common point, and that's
and you don't, and you don't have
that
the
avoids
problem.
them. Yep.
Perfect.
You don't want to daisy chain them
Right.
from radio to radio or whatever.
Michael KN4VA is asking about mobile applications. He's saying, so for mobile applications, double fuse. By the way, I'm a double fuser. And POTA or QTH, a single fuse on one side would be fine.
Which is kind of what I said at the beginning. If you
I
just
think
have
so,
your,
yeah.
If your radio is hooked up, I said a power supply, but if you're sitting at a picnic table at a park and your radio is connected to a battery, and that's the only source of power and the only wiring, a single fuse is fine, because there is no place to get that other sneak path.
To get the back path. Yep.
And there's no
Well, that's
other
like-
equipment to draw current.
That's like the ham radio troll comment go to whenever you're doing anything and you don't show a fuse in the video. People are like, "Wow, you should have had a fuse on that," because assuming like all of my stuff that's powered in the shack goes back to a MFJ power strip, and each one of the inputs on the power strip is fused. So like if I do have a cable that they can't see the power strip, they just assume that I went rogue and didn't fuse the cable.
You are kind of a rascal, I'm just saying.
But people love to call
well,
out.
that and every time you show a VNA, you didn't show calibrating your VNA.
Right.
I heard him on 11 meters today.
I was on there. Mother Nature had the condition going, had to get down.
Quadruple A. It was his call sign for that, guys.
I don't know if you got an answer for this question, Tom. I'd be like, don't put one in those cars.
So radios and cars. How about cars that are notorious for electrical problems? Older Jags, MGs, Triumphs. I mean, yes, some cars are
bad engineering.
No.
If you run the wires right back to the
I'm gonna
battery,
soapbox
though,
this.
you're kind of avoiding all of that other bad wiring in the car, right?
We've triggered Steve on this one.
I'm gonna have to soapbox this one here, fellas. Hold on a second. Watch this. So I've got a little bit of experience with foreign with British cars with MGs. The thing about MGs, and the Prince of Darkness here, is the bullet connectors. And yes, I said bullet because that's what the shape of the connector is. Over the years that people had worked on and wrenched on and modified and driven, and yes, these cars, some of them didn't make it home from the dealership brand new. It's not Lucas's fault. The people don't use the right tools for the bullet connectors to snap them together and to release them from each other.
Just like power poles.
They degraded the connector over time, and that's where the electrical faults came in. MGs are also positive ground cars, so you can't wire it to the chassis ground because there isn't a chassis ground. You have to go the opposite direction for your electrics. Put a radio in an MG if you got one. They're fine. I'm done.
Just don't bolt the chassis
don't
of the
fall off
radio
that
to the
thing.
chassis of the car.
I have the jacket for a reason. I've had 4 MGs.
And
But
I
you
think
don't
one
have
of them
one
actually
now.
ran.
Did it for a minute?
Well, one of them didn't have an engine when I bought it, but that's beside the point.
So I did not know they were a positive ground car. So how do you deal with the antenna? I mean, you have to insulate
Yep.
like the antenna from the car and to insulate the chassis of the radio from the car.
Yeah, you have to ham harder.
There was a reason we left that country.
Or you can rewire it to be negative ground like everything else. It's actually a pretty easy process.
I don't. Let's see. I think we had a couple other comments that might be apocryphal. Oh, and Richie has dropped a super sticker on us. Richie, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate it,
Thank you,
buddy.
Richie.
And Tom, I think you or
Never.
Ape1 mentioned this. The negative lead of the radio should never go straight to the battery because people do, they fuse the negative.
I'm not sure.
I always take
Maybe
mine
he's
there.
talking about what Abe said about some people think you shouldn't go all the way back to the battery because
Yeah.
you get more noise. Or I don't agree with that. I don't have like hard data to show you to tell you that's wrong. But
Taking the negative back to the battery. See, I'm lazy. I would fundamentally just take the negative right to the frame where I was.
Open shortest path first.
well,
Right?
So
Yes, correct.
I think I told you guys the last time we talked that my day job, I did a lot of work on hybrid electric, like city buses, transit buses. And we have really high voltage systems on those. And we use the frame for ground, we have shielded high voltage cables and such. And steel, and believe it or not, even worse, stainless steel. Steel and stainless steel are lousy conductors. They are way worse than copper and aluminum. So
Yeah, I could believe that. But when I was younger and I did CB stuff, we always took the negative to chassis. We never took the negative back to the battery. And
I mean, it's
also when
easier.
That's a 5 watt. That's a 5 watt radio.
well, and then when
Officially.
and then when we did
Well,
like
stock.
back then, everybody had big
4.
subwoofers and all that stuff in their car, and big old Alpine amps and all that stuff.
Swings.
All of it went to chassis ground. Now I'm not saying that was right by any stretch of the imagination because I had zero idea what I was doing, and I was just operating off of bro science, right? Everybody be like, "Bro, that's the way you do it, bro." And so I thought that was the way to do it. But like I said, when I put a radio in the car now, I do run the positive and negative to the battery, and I
That's
do
funny.
fuse both of them because that's what I read in the manufacturer's manual.
IST.
And like with anything, there's 50 ways to do
ISTP.
anything. I mean, it's not wrong. It's not going to not work if you ground it to the
Right.
chassis. So
But
Right.
I would love to know the science of either way and just to know which way is right and which way is wrong. Because like Ape, I mean, I installed, I don't know how many car stereos in raggedy cars I had over the years.
Stereo worth more than the car, Jim.
was
Yes,
getting that
more than
bump.
once. That's right.
He had them subs getting
Well,
that bump.
Freebird has to be all the way up to 11. Okay. I'm just saying. And, yeah, I did the same thing. Every one of those things was grounded to the chassis, straight to it. It's bad enough running a hot wire somewhere, tapping off the windshield wiper motor or something.
But I was just drilling a hole wherever all right, this is how long the cable is.
I've done that too.
I
I was
had no
afraid
idea.
the floor would fall out of my bug if I drilled any more holes in it, so I had to stop.
well,
Okay, I
and that's
Jim's
when you
amp,
get the
Jim's
older.
amp would go up and down with the windshield wipers.
That's right.
So did you have the bug where the spare tire, the air pressure in the spare tire actually
I did.
powered
did.
the windshield washers?
Yep. MGs
I
were like
did.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's a
Yep.
car right there. Bug.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we got some more housekeeping to do. We got Frank wants to join in the argument. Always fuse both leads, negative to frame and battery. This is the way. Thank you, Frank. And we got Jason. I never thought I'd hear OSPF being a life philosophy. Yes, that is true.
Jason, we
Lazy-
try,
Lazy
son.
wins.
Absolutely. OSPF is my mantra, honestly.
And that was Chuck's dog celebrating your super chat. So hit
I
it,
think I'm
Jim.
gonna have to give him CPR.
It sounded like a hairball or something. I thought maybe Chuck had a. Yeah.
So wait a minute. I must have missed OSPF. How did I miss that?
Oh, I said it. I actually said all the words. Open shortest path first.
Well, we were talking about running the ground straight to the car chassis because it's easier and quicker. I said I was lazy and it's the shortest way to get the ground there.
Right.
And
right.
then he said OSPF. So
Bryant was saying he wasn't buying all that extra wire to go back to the battery.
that's right. I ain't paying for that, man.
Cheap old man
Well,
compliant.
Well, like I used to buy like that thick monster cable, or what it was called, and
Yep.
it was probably like 80 cents a foot back then. And I'm like, man, that cable cost like $6, but
That's like a half a tank of gas back then, wasn't it?
compared to what we pay for wire now, it's nuts.
maybe half a gallon.
Right.
Monster cable is one of those incredibly overpriced.
Oh
for
yeah.
Yeah,
what it
because you're
is.
paying for the name.
Well,
OFC,
it's
oxygen-free copper.
it's thicker because they put that magnifying outside layer on it, so it looks like it's thicker.
Well, you had to
Until
have
you bust it
stuff like
open.
monster cable in case chicks looked at your installation, right?
Right. That's right.
You don't
Because
want to
they
be like,
did
Say
oh,
no.
what so and so has monster cable in his amplifier.
That's right.
Jim got that stuff from the Kmart that don't even
Bigger is
match.
better.
Some silver and gold speaker wire and some gold and gold speaker wire. How many of you wired power with speaker wire?
Plenty
Still
of times.
do. What do you mean? Did.
I can
Yep.
beat that. 64 VW Bug, $100, but it
I
only
had a
had 3
six-
pistons.
I had a 68 for $300.
And if
I saw
only
like
we
a
had those
68.
today.
I saw like a 68 that was for sale. It was $5,000 is what the guy wanted for it. It started up. It didn't sound terrible. And
60 was too new.
I don't know. I was thinking about. I was tempted. I was really tempted.
For $5,000?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it did need
not a
some
bad
paint
deal.
work done on it.
Dang. I'm surprised
Well, you
it has
guys
a
saw
4
mine.
pin.
Mine was a 66. I bought it for 5 and sold it for 13.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
My dad had a
Couple videos.
56. Had porthole windows in the back, a little bitty window in the back, and then the blinkers came out of the side of the doors.
Semaphores, yeah.
We couldn't figure
Ron,
out what the
yes.
noise was the first time we drove it. We made it a Baja Bug, run it. It was cool though.
I guess it's turned into the coffee and Volkswagen.
Yeah, the
Beetle.
coffee and Volkswagen
I
channel.
want one of those buses with all the windows. Is what I want.
The
I
20
saw
21
one
window bay.
recently.
hmm
Thank you for this.
Smokey
Oh,
has dropped a
Pop out.
$20 super chat. Tom, thank you for the
Smokey.
7,300 video playlist.
wow. Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
And Smokey, thank you. Here's the official
Smokey.
Chuck. Thank you. Chuck dropping it
Makes my
like
ears
it's hot.
tingle.
Chuck was dropping it like it was lukewarm. I mean, that's
That's right.
I was trying to be nice to him.
Chuck
I
was
was trying
dropping
to-
it in his Metamucil.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I had that
Man.
a couple of videos, man.
So let's talk
You have to
about your
tell me which
crowbar
one, though.
circuit, Tom. I want to hear
Are
about
we done
that.
with the fuse? Are we done with the fuse debate?
what'd
It
you
sounds
do?
like
I
we
think
are.
we've hit the fuse debate.
Tom said the way to do it. Case closed. I think that's
We
what
will
it is.
never be done with the fuse debate.
He had
Uh,
diagrams. That shit was
57%
official.
of the chat agrees.
Two
Where are we
fuses.
at?
Steve
There's
dropped
a,
a
there's a
poll.
poll in the chat.
Only 57, huh?
Well, it's
You
a hot
people
button
need-
issue.
You people need to get with the
Mhm.
program out there. I'm
Yes,
just
it
saying.
is.
And one of the things that we learned, Tom, is after Tio posted his video on the crowbar circuit, that the crowbar circuit is as controversial as fusing the negative line.
It is.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the little crowbar circuit. I never intended that to replace other fuses that should be in the system. So I never really occurred to me to fuse
Didn't-
the negative side of that.
Tio, didn't you have some batteries generate more power than 12 volts or something? 12-volt batteries can generate more power, something like that. Some weird.
Oh, yeah, there was a very weird comment on my video. Let me see if I can
Oh,
dig it up.
well,
Oh.
so
That guy was
And
a
I-
crackhead.
I actually talked about this on my video on it when I was first explaining it. And look, I've worked with batteries. I've worked with lead acid, lithium ion for 25 years on hybrid buses. There is no condition that I am aware of with any battery chemistry, whether it's lithium ion, nickel metal hydride, any of those, and any of the different lithium ion variants, the iron phosphate and so on. There's no condition where a battery's voltage will suddenly increase,
Amen.
period. Unless now, if it's on a charger and your charger voltage regulator goes, then that can start raising the battery voltage. But a battery
but
by
your-
itself will never.
Your
go
9-volt
up.
radio and your transistors you're bopping down the street isn't going to suddenly explode and make your ear catch on fire by going to 18 volts or something. That's right.
Right.
So those lithium-ion batteries that spontaneously explode on aircraft, they don't overvolt at all.
They over discharge, right?
Well,
Where's that discharge go?
The
Well, the
reason,
discharge is amperage.
yes, but the reason that most of the battery fires, well, there's a couple different ones. I mean, you've heard about things with, cell phones in people's pockets. Those are because of a mechanical failure inside the cell where a short circuit formed in between one of the cells of the battery and then it got hot. Because the insulation that's in between the layers in those batteries is microscopically thin. Now they've gotten way better. The batteries, virtually all lithium-ion batteries today, any of the reputable ones, they've actually got fusing built into the battery now. So a lot of those things are less likely. The thermal runaway that happened with the Boeing planes years ago, that was a problem with the battery management circuit and the charging circuit, where the battery actually was getting, one of the cells was getting overvoltaged. And when it went over voltage enough, then it erupted.
So it is possible.
But it was being charged. It's not the battery chemistry by itself did not increase in voltage. It was a problem with the charging circuit. So
The charger made it do the bad thing, is what you're
correct.
saying.
Yes.
Right. And we had an internal Coffee and Ham Radios roundtable debate.
Lord.
And that's where we landed is that you could potentially have a problem with the charger overvolting. And if the charger had connectivity to your positive and negative leads, and then your radio was had connectivity to your positive and negative leads, then the potential would exist for an overvoltage potential situation. I guess I use the word potential ironically there, but it would, then you might have a challenge, right? But that's where we left. Now with, MFJ had a power supply, and I'm drawing a blank on the model number, but I think they're 40 amp or 45 amp power supply. They had a problem with some of the designs there where that power supply was overvolting and smoking people's radios. So that's a perfect use case for why you would want to have the crowbar circuit,
The
right?
crowbar.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
I've
that's
had a
what it's
Kenwood
for.
power
is-
supply that did that.
Tom, is that a buff on the door up there? It looks like one.
So,
Some KD's asking.
So I saw the question. I don't know what a buff is.
Big, ugly, fat friend. It's
It
Air
looks like a
Force
plane.
slang for a B-52.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it's not. That's actually a C-17.
Okay, that's bigger.
Again, let's see. You probably can't. I don't have a good way to zoom in. Sorry.
It doesn't look like it has enough engines from here, so
No, it's got, well, so it's a little, let me see. Can I point? It's a little hard to see. The plane is the top half, and I'm sure you can't read it. The bottom half is actually my name. That is it's cut out of steel. That was a gift from one of the engineers at Boeing. I worked on the C-17 flight controls for several years. So
sweet.
one of the Boeing engineers gave me that as a going away present. C-17 is a cool plane. It is a really cool plane.
So you worked on electric hybrid buses, right?
Yes.
So high voltage DC, like 400 volt batteries. What are those things running?
Our system operates between 600 and 800 volts.
600 and 800. Okay.
And
600 and 800 or 6 period.
No, 600 to
Okay,
800.
just making
volts.
sure, because anything's possible.
It would be hard to make power down at 6 volts.
Steve is in
Because-
denial about the battery thing, I think. I don't know.
I just, I'm just here for the fun.
So
So what kind
um,
of current and wiring is used in something like that?
the traction motor so we do 40-foot buses. Well, we don't build buses. My company built the electric drive systems for the buses, and the traction motor on the 60-foot well, actually even on the 40-footers, it can draw up to 900 amps at low speeds and high torque. So you're looking at 900 amps at 600, 550, 600 volts.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a 300 kilowatt motor. So it does, it's a substantial, well, you're trying to push a 40,000 pound bus.
Yeah.
up in San Francisco. We have buses that are running in San Francisco, and those really
Oh my
steep
God.
hills.
Yeah.
We're pushing a 40,000-pound bus up those steep hills, and actually, San Francisco's got some 60-foot hybrids of ours too. So that's a 63,000-pound bus.
Well, the
Well, like,
upside to that
didn't
is
the
if you have
cable
an
cars-
accident, it will kill you dead, and it will happen very quickly. You won't know you're dying.
High voltage can ruin your day if you're not very careful.
Wow.
What about the cable car?
Well, I guess the cable cars had a live wire that ran down the top of the street, right? And then they have like a hook or something like that went on there to like, was that electricity that powered the cable car like that?
So no, there's two. So the cable cars, it's a cable that runs under the ground, and actually they're run by the same company, the same transit agency that runs all the buses. So I got a little bit of a tour of it from one of the engineers there, but the cable is about almost an inch in diameter, and it's a steel cable that's running underground. There's a slot in the road, and there is a clamp on the bottom of the car that sticks through that slot. And when the driver pulls the lever, it squeezes that clamp against the cable, and the cable literally pulls the car up the road. The interesting thing is, and there's a powerhouse. I don't remember where it is, but actually there's a couple of them because there's a couple different lines. But there's a powerhouse with a big giant motor and this great big wheel that's spinning around, that's rotating that cable. It's like the cable on a ski lift. It's the
Ski
same
lift
idea.
cable, yeah.
It's something like that. And the motor that pulls that cable, I believe it's only 150 horsepower. And the reason that they can get away with such a small motor is they have all of the routes designed so that basically half the cable cars are going up a hill and half of them are going down a hill at the same time.
At the same time.
So the ones going down the hill are helping to pull the ones up the hill.
So it's not like the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity like in Back to the Future when they need to harness the lightning bolt.
No,
And they're saying I'm mistaken the cable car with the street car. I don't know what I'm talking about.
so they call it, I think those two terms are used interchangeably.
I've interchanged them a bunch.
But in San Francisco, they do also have trolley buses that have the overhead cable, and it's got the big like spring-loaded piece that goes up against the wire, and that is a 600 volt DC. There's 600 volts DC in that overhead wire. And speaking of chassis grounds, it uses the ground is the rails on the road are the ground side of that circuit.
I would imagine
And-
that's dangerous at some level.
Well, you wouldn't want to reach up and grab the cable overhead, that's for sure.
It'd be a bad day.
Especially not with wet feet on the rail below.
I believe there are, because we actually looked into this, I think there are 7 cities in North America that still have electric trolley cars. San Francisco's one. Vancouver in Canada has one.
New Orleans,
Dayton,
yeah.
Dayton, Ohio actually has them.
I'm
I've
going
seen
to
theirs.
have a field trip this year.
I
There
guess
you
we're
go.
going to.
So anyway,
Hey,
Yeah, we
go.
don't really talk about Vancouver. The Canadians don't really mean
They're
a
trying to
lot.
invade. They're plotting all the time.
Well, the other day I was doing FT8 and I kept getting Canadian contacts, and it's such a nuisance.
I remember
I
you
was like,
telling me about that. Stop it, you Canucks. Leave me alone. I want real DX. You're just like an extra state. You're like North Minnesota or something.
I like the comment that came up about don't have a tall antenna, and that's true.
Right.
I mean, I think the catenary wires are like 14 feet or something, but still, there's probably hams that have an antenna that tall on their car somewhere.
I've offended my Canadian nemesis now with the Canada comments.
Yeah, I've got a 5/8 2-meter mounted on the lip of the hood on my Jeep, and it's pretty high up. And I constantly have to get out and fold it down to go into like parking garages and stuff like that, because otherwise
Yeah.
it is a recipe for disaster.
Flirting with disaster.
Right.
So do you guys want to start some other controversy and talk about
Please.
crowbars?
Yes.
Why they
We
are
love
what
it.
they are?
Yeah, bring
Sure.
it. Bring it. You're smarter than any of us for sure. So bring it.
I doubt that. Okay, so this is just a piece of the crowbar circuit. Is that? Yeah, that's showing up okay. So the piece here that's labeled D1, that is the SCR, or silicon controlled rectifier. And then over here we have a Zener diode, and the whole circuit is very simple. A Zener, and I mean, there's a little bit of filtering stuff here, but these three components are most of the circuit, the important part. A Zener diode, for people that don't know how they work, a diode conducts in one direction and not in the other. And a Zener diode works the same way, except that it has what's called a Zener voltage. And so this diode, if you look, is in here backwards because the top of this circuit is positive. So voltage will not go through this diode until it gets over its Zener voltage or its breakdown voltage. And then this diode will try to keep the voltage exactly at that voltage across it. So as the voltage up here gets higher, the voltage between the Zener and resistor will start to go up. There's no voltage at all until this gets above the trip voltage. And if you look here, this says B14. This is a 14-volt Zener. And if you guys remember, the trip voltage for this circuit is 15 volts.
Right.
So you might say, well, why do I have a 14-volt Zener? This SCR, and we'll talk about how they work in a second here, this lead is called the gate lead, and the SCR will not turn on until this gate voltage gets above a certain threshold, and on this diode, it's about 1.3 volts. So if I want this to trip at 15 volts, I need to have the Zener start conducting at 14 so that it will start putting a voltage into here. And then when it gets, and because this point, if it's exactly 14 volts, this will just start conducting, and this point here will be 0. When this up top gets to 15 volts, now this point here will be 1 volt. And then it'll get high enough to trip the gate.
So
And
when the
that's
gate
when
passes,
your switch goes.
That's when the switch goes. And so I've
Yeah.
had people ask me, and I think you guys got some questioning comments of, like, why are you using an SCR? SCRs are old fashioned and all that. And so let me pop up another. We're going to look at a data sheet. This is almost as bad as math.
Yeah, pay
So-
attention, boys.
there will be a test.
Every electronic component comes with what's called a data sheet. And these data sheets are pretty standard in their format. The first page tells you, well, this is the greatest thing in the world. And, tells you about how they, this is our thing. And actually, if you look here, one of the things they tell you is over voltage crowbar protection is what this is made for. There's 2 reasons to use an SCR in this instead of a transistor. Well, actually 3. One of those reasons is that an SCR, this path, it acts like a switch. An SCR can only ever be on or off. A transistor, you can, if you hard switch a transistor, you can make it be all the way on. But transistors, like when they're used in your amplifiers, they can be halfway between on and off. And so they have resistance to them. An SCR, once it turns on, it's full on. There is no in between. What is this SCR? You have to reverse? Yes, this is correct. Mark Wolf is absolutely correct. And that's the second reason for using an SCR. Once this gate trips and this turns on, it stays on. No matter what happens on the gate after that, when this turns on, it stays on until the voltage goes away, like you blow the fuse in my little crowbar circuit. So this thing is going to stay on and hold that voltage down going towards your rig until all the voltage goes away, or until the SCR burns up. whichever comes first. And then that is the third reason for using an SCR. And let me scroll down a little. We're going to go to the other parts of the data sheet here. One of the normal things in a data sheet is absolute maximum ratings. So this is like the most that this thing can deal with. And if you look here, it's got RMS on state current and average on state current. So this is like if you were going to use this as a real switch that would be on all the time. It can deal with 40 amps RMS or 22 or 25 amps average. This is at different temperatures. But then let's look at this non-repetitive surge peak on state current, 394 amps. SCRs are unbelievably robust devices compared to a transistor. They can deal with a lot of abuse. So if you have a fuse that's stubborn, say, and doesn't want to blow, this thing is probably going to still keep that short across the circuit for long enough to blow even the toughest fuse.
The cheapest, crappiest fuse, because your video, Tom, if you guys haven't seen it, you know, go look at Tom's channel. Tom did a smoking awesome video on fuses, and not all little plastic fuses are created equal.
Yeah, buy Bussmann and little fuse fuses. Don't buy anything else.
Yeah, I was buying
threw out-
General So.
I
I
threw
was
out all
buying
my
General
crappy
So
ones.
fuses. Yeah.
Yeah. I got some down there by my cell phone cables and right next to the sushi at the Zippy Lube Mart thing down the road.
So
Yeah, actually,
yeah,
I have-
and I see one of the
have
comments
control
going by. Actually, I think it was Mark commented. Yeah, only 8.3 milliseconds. It'll hold 400 amps only for 8.3 milliseconds, but it'll hold 100 amps for a while. So those are the reasons that I use an SCR, is that it's just it's a really very robust device.
And those are in a lot of higher end power supplies as well.
every
right? Those are-
Astron power supply
Astron's
has a
got 'em, right?
crowbar. Yep.
I know that for a fact.
Yes.
I tested
so, and a lot of the switching power supplies have like short circuit detection that'll shut off and other things. But the biggest thing with a switching power supply is if the regulator fails. That's when, if the regulation circuit fails, then that's when you can get an overvoltage even with a switcher.
So we've got a couple. Jody's saying SCRs are the go-to tech for one-time use crowbars at the device end of the line. Power supplies frequently have more complex fold-back current limiter CCTS with much more complexity. SCR is gold.
Yeah, and all of that is true. And if you got a good quality power supply, you probably don't need my circuit. I mean, what I made my circuit for is, and I said this in my video about this, is, and somebody, I think Steve mentioned Cheap Old Man or whatever, but
Yep.
we'll go out and we'll buy a $3,000 radio, and then
I got this power supply for $69.99 on special at Hamfest.
exactly. We'll put a $50 or $60 power supply to run our $3,000 radio. So, that's the way we roll. And
So
I
Bill is
figured-
asking, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead.
Bill is asking, once the SCR turns on now, is there a voltage drop? I mean, it's going to go to zero.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's
That's
a
the
little
whole-
bit. It's like a transistor. An SCR has like a half a volt drop across it. So, I mean, this is
Okay.
your 14 volts. They're 13.8 volts out here. If this goes to 15 or 16 or whatever to trip this, once this turns on, this output is going to go to half a volt until the fuse that's over here, till that fuse blows, or
Right.
some other fuse upline blows.
Yeah, I guess I just need to throw all these fuses away, right? Because and buy all the Bussmans.
Well, and here's the problem with a fuse. You can test it, but once you test it, it's no good anymore. There's like
Right,
no
you can only
way to-
test it once, right? That's
Yeah,
that's where the problem is. Well, I guess that one worked. That was a good one.
That's a
Yeah,
good fuse.
exactly.
Let me put that in the good fuse pile.
Right.
So yes,
Oh,
that is
man.
the problem with fuse. Well, and the problem with the bad ones is when if you buy one of those cheap ones when you put it in the circuit, it's like, oh yeah, the radio turns on. Look at that, it works great. You don't find out that a bad fuse is bad until something really, until something goes south in your radio or
Yeah, well,
so-
I remember learning about fuses from again, bro science, right? Where everybody's like, bro, if your fuse blows, you just get a higher value fuse.
That's
how you
right.
fix
Amp it
that.
up, son. Amp it up.
You just put a bigger fuse in there.
Or use a
Absolutely.
nail. I use a 10-penny nail. It works fine. See, the radio works.
One and done, man.
So Ham Till
So
It Hurts made a comment here, and Tom, I don't know if he's serious about this. When those things dump that amount of current, 400 amps, what kind of EM field does that create? Who cares? 400 amps being dumped in your face is a bad day. Don't be there.
I mean, hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it never has to get to the 400 amps because the fuse is
Right.
going to go way before you get there. So before I worked on hybrid buses, I used to work on electric forklifts, a company called the Raymond Corporation, and they actually used an SCR drive to drive the motors on the forklifts. And they did these were SCRs that were like hockey pucks. They were like 4 inches around and like an inch thick, like a big aluminum block with a cable coming out of the top of it. And they would do 300, 400, 500 amp pulses to, these were like 36 volt DC motors. And it was super low frequency by today's standards. It was the switching frequency was like 400 hertz. So like, and when you were like idling or just starting the motor, the switching was even lower than that. It was like 20 hertz. And you could literally hear these things going like, the conduction. And the batteries, if you've ever seen a forklift battery, it's got, it's a big giant lead acid battery, and they've got these big like 4-aught cables. You could look at the cables and see the cables pushing apart every time it pulsed. So yes, it's quite an EM field that it can create.
Frank was wondering what bus line you work for.
I
was ignoring Frank because he may not want to tell us that.
I don't
No, he
work for
doesn't
a
have to
bus
say.
line. I work for a company that makes electric drive systems
Oh, okay.
for buses. So it's not a bus we're not a bus manufacturer.
So there you go, Frank.
Yeah.
Frank's asked that like 3 times. I've ignored him. I thought maybe he'd gotten the memo by now.
Maybe he worked for the same bus company or was hoping he did. But no, it's not I don't work for any
Frank-
bus companies.
Frank wipes up the rear of the trains.
See a
He's the
caboose
caboose
cleaner?
guy. Yes. Well,
He drives-
Yeah, I was
not
gonna
a
say-
cleaner. He drives the caboose. Actually,
He drives the
I think
caboose. Doesn't the
they may
caboose go
drive
where
from
the
the
rest
back
of the
now.
train goes?
I thought there was a little steering wheel on the back of the caboose, though, isn't there?
Frank would have to tell us. I don't know.
Bill Myers has dropped a $10 super chat, KHGIM. Bill, thank you very
Bill.
much.
Thanks, Bill.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Those are, in fact, Simon's hands operating the spit valve on that bugle.
The spit valve.
That's a trumpet. A bugle doesn't have a spit valve.
Yeah, it
Can
wasn't
we look at
Simon's
the
hands
Can we
either,
look at the
Jim.
schematic again for the? Because I had a question
You're
about
killing
the
me,
capacitor.
Smalls. You're killing me.
Sure.
Not you, him.
Who, me?
No, not
No,
you.
me.
Whoops.
So there's a capacitor on there, C2. What is the purpose of that thing?
So the purpose of C2 is it's just a noise filter. So
Okay.
that if you get any kind of like when you first plug in, and this, when I was doing the early testing, if I plugged the crowbar circuit into a live power supply, sometimes it would trip because the arc, you get a little arc in the connector. If you have the radio and the power supply on and you plug in a live load, you get that little arc, and that would give you a little spike, because of the inductance in the wires and everything. You'd get a voltage spike and it would trip the circuit. And I didn't want it that sensitive.
Gotcha.
So that capacitor filters out little noise spikes.
It works
sense
great.
to me.
I played with it a bunch after I got it put together. I just thought it was fabulous because I just roll the knob on the power supply up just real slow and every time.
Jim, this is a family show, man.
What are you talking about? Rolling up
Jim
the
doesn't
knob
get
on the
jokes.
power supply?
Yeah,
Jim doesn't get
replay
jokes.
what you just. I know he doesn't.
I thought it worked really well. Fabulous means good, not anything else.
Fabulous.
So
I speak English.
He'd put
So
a little
part of the
Barry White
reason-
on.
part of the reason it's taken a while to get these in is I had to get samples before I got the next production lot because I did make a small change to it. And actually, part of it was some of Steve's stuff and a couple other comments. So a lot of people are using the lithium ion batteries, and we went through the whole thing. If you're just using a battery, you really don't need this. But if you've got a battery with a charging circuit, I started to get a little nervous because this trips around 15 volts. You know, there's always some component variation, so it'll be a little lower, a little higher. And a lot of these lithium ion battery packs, when you're charging them, they get really close to 15 volts. And I didn't want this thing to be false tripping on lithium ion. So the new version of this circuit actually there's two Zener diodes here. There's the 14 volt Zener, and then right next to it in the new circuit, I don't have the schematic up for the new one here, but there's a 15 volt Zener, so it'll trip at 16 volts, and there's a little jumper, and you can pick whether you want it to trip at 15 or 16 volts. So if you're using a lithium ion battery charging system, it gives you just a little extra margin.
Well, see, that would require people to read the manual though, to know that they had to switch that. And that's where that plan is going to fall apart. People won't read that.
You're right. They're going to have to read the instructions for putting it together.
No, but that makes sense to do something like that.
So that's all I got, guys. Unless you want to talk
That's
about
more than
hybrid
enough.
buses or hybrid boats
We-
or
We got to the end of the hour. That's more than enough.
We've actually ended on time mostly, and very cool.
now we can wait for all the bad comments to come in. And
So, Tom,
everything I'm
what's
doing
next
wrong.
for you besides the upgraded version 2 of the minibar
With 2 fuses.
with 2 fuses?
I'll tell you what. Give me 1 minute.
Uh-oh, are we getting some pre-production information here?
Yeah.
You heard it here, people.
If I can bear with me just 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
I got too many things on. Somebody tap dance or something for a second here.
Well, I'll say words. So the thing is that the
Lord.
crowbar circuit that
Words.
we looked at is very elegant, very simple, and would be extremely cost effective for power supply manufacturers to put one in their power supply.
And
Oh, yeah.
radio
The fact
makers.
Right. The fact that you can buy some of these power supplies that don't have them built in is a bunch of hogwash.
Dun, dun.
I find it upsetting.
I know. I find it upset. I'm upset when Abe is upset. So this
I
is
shed a
what
tear.
It's the
the
clear version.
production version of the minibar is. And this is great. And Chuck, you could replace those with XT60s. if
Oh,
you
you're
wanted,
using
I
the one
guess.
with the transparent circuit board.
Yeah, I like that one.
This is the stealth crowbar, stealth minibar.
And high quality
was-
fuse.
It was a very easy kit. There was very little soldering to do. No
No, I-
tool
So
you
rods
were
were
able-
involved.
I did
You're able
all
to work
surface
through it.
mount.
I
and-
solder better than you do, old man. So I'm just gonna say, okay. I seen
No.
your solders.
He
Fake
must be
news.
talking to you, one of you guys.
I'm talking to the primate over there. I seen his soldering.
Dude, your hands shake like a dog
It's
passing a pine
rustier than the
cone.
barnacles on the Titanic. I seen your soldering, man.
No.
Chuck, Daddy and Daddy are fighting again.
I know.
Tom,
All
what
right,
were you
they-
gonna say?
None
We
of
were
that.
just-
None of that happened at Course Fest. I don't know. It's weird.
Oh, I was
not a
saying I
problem.
used
Fast.
surface mount for the for the active components on it, but those are all pre-assembled. So all you got to do
Thank God. Yeah.
is the connectors.
Yep.
All right, you guys ready for your exclusive?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh,
Dude,
look
we're
at
gonna make you full screen, Tom.
Whoa, I'm playing.
Do you want
with
me
the
to do
wrong
it?
thing here.
Eventually.
I got
All
it.
I was waiting.
Turner,
Dave,
it is
yeah.
in the description of the show. Tom does have a YouTube channel.
And a website.
Ham radio A to Z.
It's actually not
So
in the description. I was lazy.
Ooh.
Lord, you can't get
Yeah.
good help these days.
all right, anybody want to guess?
So rotate that back around on
It's
the
a,
end.
it's a magnetic charging system.
It's spark gap
That's an-
transmitter.
No,
That's an
yeah.
RJ45 audio cable dingus.
Isolator,
see-
some sort.
It is an
2.5.
audio cable dingus.
Woo!
2.5, 3.5.
So
So you can
it's-
transmit audio using RJ45 wires. It's a Balin.
But it's any
Well,
to any,
no.
right? So you can do any. You could use any interface to any interface, right?
Well, so this is what this is, and TO does. I think you do a fair amount of portable operating.
Yep.
And I don't know if do you have like a Heil headset or
I don't,
Uh,
but it looks like a
or-
audio
or some-
interface. Yeah.
some kind of headset.
He
Have you
has a
ever been-
Huawei. He has a Huawei
Chuck does.
headset.
Have you ever been sitting at a picnic table with your setup,
Ooh.
and you got a headset on, and then your
Breakaway
wife is
circuit.
like, "Hey, get over here! I need you to get the dog," and you jump up away from the table and you
Okay.
either rip your
Or
headset
my
off
wife
your head,
steps on the
or
cable. Yeah.
or you rip the radio off of the table.
Yep.
This is a magnetic.
MagSafe.
disconnect. This is
That's
a,
awesome.
This is
Safe.
This is a MagSafe, and you can use either an RJ45, which some rigs use, and the 3.5 and 2.5 on this, because this is the TRRS 2.5, is specifically for the 705. So one side
Joe
you
Brett.
plug two little short jumper cables into your rig, and the other side you plug in your headset cables, and if you get up and jump away, and this obviously doesn't have the case on it. There's going to be a little 3D printed case, but this is going to be a MagSafe disconnect for headsets for radios.
That is cool.
It
That is cool.
I know one ham that would have saved his 7300 from getting a dent.
Yeah, Shane, right? That's what happened to Shane's.
I believe so. Yeah.
No, I think Shane's is that something happened to the mast, and it was the coax that pulled it off the table.
Okay.
Now, next you need to make a MagSafe for cameras, because I've almost pulled a expensive camera over. I went to wireless. That helped.
Right.
Microphones.
I'm using a wireless mic for just that reason.
Me too.
How close are those
Same
to
here.
being in production?
Well, so I'm thinking this is going to be a kit. I'm if the kit goes really well, then maybe I'll do production, but I'm ready to get some test boards in and put them together and just make sure that, all the gazintas and gazoutas actually are connected to the right places and it actually works. So I should have, well, and again, you got the Chinese New Year thing is going on. I actually really want to try to get U.S. manufacturing for my stuff. I mean, some of the Chinese companies I've worked with have been great, but I just would like to do it here. But man, it's hard to find a place that's economical enough that people can afford it.
Well, if you're
Yeah,
going
at
to get
the
like
scale.
PCBs or something like that, I don't even know of any U.S. based PCB companies. I'm sure
Well,
there's
there's a-
somebody.
Oh,
There's a
the
few.
Purple PCB company. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Well, very cool.
well, thanks,
As I
guys.
said,
for
Tom
having
is
me on.
way smarter than all the rest of
Yeah.
us. There's a
Yeah,
fact.
Tom, thank you for enlightening
Very
us. It was
much.
great.
So we've got Kyle live streaming right now on AA0Z Alpha 0 Zulu YouTube
Starting to
channel.
jump.
And then we also have our buddy Simon who does all of our trombone. Just to
the
get
vignette.
You're trying to
Jim
trigger me.
ironed
I'm
up again.
ignoring you now. Stop.
This
Just
time.
stop.
Performances. He's going to be on at 8:30 with a premiere of a new antenna that he's got. That's right up Chuck's alley. Tent poles and multi-element Yagis.
Yes. that
Simon
was
makes
something I-
antennas out of old Foster's cans and some string.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to do the tent pole thing like he did. He beat me to it.
Yeah. And Tom has been sporting his Coffee and Ham Radios
I
Tumblr. If you guys
have.
want your
Mine.
Tumblr,
got mine.
coffeeandhamradios.com.
We have any of those left, James?
And
We
I
do.
have an
There's a-
Apollo antenna that's not quite put together yet because it's been 6 below zero here for 2 weeks.
Well,
Ham
that's
harder,
good
Tom.
reason.
Ham harder.
Inside
I
work.
mean, 6 below is, you know.
Yeah.
It was like 16 in Alabama, and we pretty much had to close the entire state down.
Bill's here.
Well, it was almost 70 today, so I'm going to be putting the antenna together and taking it out
Awesome.
and playing with it.
We're getting
Awesome.
major rainstorms here, unfortunately.
They call that the atmospheric river, Chuck. Is what they were saying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Atmospheric river.
And I met Kyle. I should go check him out. I met Kyle at the St. Louis Ham Fest last Saturday.
Oh, sorry about
So
that.
are you going to be? You're going to be at Hamcation
Yeah.
next week, Tom?
I am not. I am not.
Okay.
I'm gonna. Huntsville is probably the next major one I'm gonna make this year.
All right.
I was telling
We'll
Abe
be there.
earlier
Well,
when
we'll see
you
you
were on
there.
the phone that my son decided to get married the weekend of Dayton,
How
and my
rude.
wife thinks
The
that he should
nerve.
go to the wedding instead of Dayton.
Well, you should
You
show
knew
her.
you knew she'd side with him. Wow. No sense of priority. Tom, thank you very much for being here, buddy.
Thanks, Tom.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
I'm going to
guys.
hit the button, fellas.
Hit the right one.
Later on, everyone.